So, when the title disappears, who are you really? And how do women rise when status no longer protects them? That's the question we're going to unpack today. And I'm super excited to have Suzette joining me today from Brooklyn. Suzette, welcome. Thank you so much for being here. I've been so looking forward to our conversation.
Thank you so much for having me, my fellow pink lady, Vicky. I love it. Thank you.
Yeah, you're on brand too. So I love that. Thank you. And audience, for those of you who cannot see us in this conversation today, we both are wearing pink. Feminine
Yes,
power. Love it.
absolutely.
Well, it's lovely to have you here, Suzette. And I'd love for you just to share a little bit about your story with the audience. Tell us how you've gotten to where you are today.
Absolutely. And again, Vicky, thank you so much for being so generous and such a great spirit and for having me on this incredible platform. First generation American kid. And so I've kind of lived all over the place. I've lived in, I was born in the North, raised primarily in the South. So formative years in Florida. I've lived in Atlanta, Tennessee, New York, California, London, back to New York, and have had just this wonderful, beautiful, circuitous journey.
Love that.
Right, that began with parents that had, the desire to have a better life in this country. And I've just had an opportunity to, be a realizer of my own dreams through career opportunities, now through building my own brand through the Beyond Titles book. And so, I am grateful for the opportunities I've had to spend time in the nonprofit space, also most recently been in tech. And I think the through line for me in all of this is that I am just a product of a community that has continued to pour into and nourish and take care of me, and blessed to be able to give back into my community in that way, and hopefully have refilled some cups through the Beyond Titles book.
Oh, I love it. I love it. I love it. Well, I'm excited to jump in and talk about the book a little bit. And, I'm going to kick us off with that one big, big question. So, when title gets stripped away, who are you? Right. And many of us face this in life. I went through it myself back in 2008. And all of a
Mhm.
sudden, I wasn't, the president of the Bombay Furniture Company. And I was like, oh my God, who am I now? Right.
Mhm.
It's a it's a journey. Like it's a soul searching journey of figuring out what is your identity and who are you. So I'd love to hear from you why so many get uncomfortable with this question, and especially high achieving women.
Absolutely. So I think, and also just want to honor your own vulnerability, right? And when your title left, right? Like you're confronted with, now what? And I think a
Hmm.
lot of that is what is taught to us culturally, and what is ingrained in us in terms of success is how high we climb, specifically the corporate ladder, right? And this is not to detract from or take away from the significance and importance of entrepreneurship, but in our country in particular, in capitalist environments, success is very much dictated by not only income but the status through title. And so what has become really important for me, but has been important to me, is having clarity about the reality is when you go to work for someone else, for as much as companies care about you, for as much as companies, want to pour into you and help you grow and develop, a company can only be as loyal to you as its bottom line. And so what then becomes important is if that company's loyalty is no longer by your side, and for some reason you are made to quickly pivot, whether voluntarily or involuntarily, do you still know the substance and the stuff and the incredible things that make you up and comprise who you are without it?
I love that.
And so, I think it's become important more now than ever, I think, right? So the book is also coming out at a really like important nexus in our community, in our world, as we're seeing, companies right sizing and investors asking for companies to be better stewards of operating margins. And we're seeing, the fastest way to make money back in a company and organization is to cut headcount, which is typically the most expensive part of anybody's budget line. And so what I want people to know and understand is you still exist outside of that space. And so who are you from a values, a passion, a purpose perspective if that change comes and when that change comes?
Yeah. You're speaking my language right there. What you just said, that is definitely my language because You are so much more than that title. And it is being in alignment with what those values are, what you stand for. Who are you being in this world? And how do you make a mark without the title? You don't have to have a title. I talk about this all the time in leadership, right? People go, "Oh, but I'm not a leader." And I'm like, "Really? Are you sure about that?" Like, let's talk about that a little bit.
Absolutely, right? Like, I think if we contextualize leadership solely by being in charge of people, we are so limited because we also know the person with the title is sometimes not the person actually making or driving the most impact, right? And so if you are IC, right, like you actually, I feel like sometimes even as an individual contributor, have more opportunity to drive and lead impact than the person that's sitting at the top of the food chain because you have the malleability, the flexibility, the vision, right? And the experience from your seat to help drive in the same way as a person that, is so far removed from the immediate work.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I love that you shared the impact. I would also say the influence. Like, where does the influence come from in your organization, right? Because it's not often the person with the big title. It's the persons that are doing the day to day. It's the persons that are walking and embodying the values that most align with each person, right? So,
Absolutely. And
yeah.
I've had, one of the conversations I talk about in the book is exactly that. So I worked in Atlanta Public Schools. I was in the office of the chief of staff, and just being young. And when I think about, I'm also grateful to be the product of people seeing my leadership potential at an early age. So I'm talking like I'm 23, second year grad school, right? Fresh out, I went straight to grad school from undergrad. And my very first mentor and leader, Dr. Janice Moncriedan, she was the legislative director for the district. I'm reporting into her, and she's like, "You're going to have access to every single leadership opportunity that any leader here in this district has," which gave me a lot of exposure, right? And so
Mm,
then to go to an organization that was a service provider and a partner to the district immediately following, I knew the nuance of exactly what you just said. It's not sufficient in that school district to simply know the superintendent or the associate superintendents. Do you know the chief human resource officer's assistant? Do you know her family story? Do you have the relationship with her? Because when you need a meeting, she influences and controls that, right? And it's, do you know across an ecosystem of an environment that real influence is usually from the people that are at the more mid level space of existence, because those are also the people that tend to have the longest tenure. But if you don't think about influence and leadership from multiple facets, you miss, right? Like that leadership lives and breathes across layers and layers and layers of organization.
love that. Love that. And Suzette, you just said something again near and dear to me. It's that relationship, right?
Absolutely.
Understanding and connecting with someone from that lens of curiosity, from that lens because you want to be genuinely connected with that person, but that also helps them remember you, right? And we
Absolutely.
don't do enough of that in the world because we think transactional, especially I would say in North America. We're very focused on transactions versus relationship. And relationship is critical, what you just said.
Absolutely, right? And if we even think regionally in the US, right? Having worked and started my career in the South, I understood the significance of highly relational environments because before you do business, do you know who I am and do I trust you, right? Like
Yes.
we forget, right? Like one of the strongest indicators of success is that people can say with clarity that they trust you, right? And trust being foundational to everything else. And in the pace that we're in and people moving so quickly, I think we're getting back to a place now where relationships are going to be king again because people have to trust that they're going in. And this is what I love about Gen Z is they're bringing trust back to the table and values back to the table in the conversation about the work environment.
Yeah, love that. Love that. Well, and I say that all the time. You work with people you know, like, and trust, right? Because if you don't
Exactly.
trust them, you don't work with them. And that's a very valuable skill. And by the way, I grew up in the South as well. And maybe that's where it comes from for me too,
Yeah.
because it
We're
is
Southern
very,
girls.
I know.
Exactly.
It is very relational though, right? And when you are curious about people, what it shows, you're present, you're listening, you want to know more about their life and what's brought them. That's why I asked you, like, what brought you here, right? Like, I'm genuinely curious, like, how we get from one place to the next. And I know our audience sits back and they're asking those questions, right? Like, how'd you have the courage to write this book? Right? Like, I mean, that's amazing.
Thank you. It's funny. My mother, it was her 60th birthday. And so, again, my mom is the first person ever on either side of my family to immigrate to the US, right? And so, but my mom is also like, coming into this place where, wanting to travel more. And so for her 60th birthday, we went to the Dominican Republic. But what I also love about my mother is she carries all these wonderful stories in her. So it's her 60th birthday, and she's like, you were brave before you were born. And I talk about in the
That
book, I talk about her saying that, but I think a lot of the courage that I have, a lot of the confidence comes from having and being just well loved and nurtured, but also taught that like I should be trying to live to the full extent of my dreams. And so a part of living my dreams is asking in a covenant with the universe to be present for those right opportunities for me, right? And so, my dad had this dream of me writing a book, and sometimes you're like, that's just my parents, my parents believe in me, okay. And I happened to be, Vicky, in the UK. So I was in London in March of 2024. And a girlfriend of mine had just come out with a book there. And she looked at me and she's like, you need a book. And I was like, okay, you're like, okay, great. And she's like, and I want to connect you to my publisher. And again, that covenant with being open and
mhm.
ready was like, okay, like, the
Do
right
this.
opportunities will present themselves to me at the right time. So she connects me to the UK branch of her publisher. Publisher then connects me to the US branch. I was like, okay, I'm going to draft this proposal. And, I was giving myself 90 days because I'm like, this is going to be the best book ever. This opportunity is coming out of nowhere. I'm going to take full advantage of it. And Vicky, I got to day 87 because the other thing to know about me is that I have always had, all of the burners on the stove going, right? So I've worked full time.
Of course. Why would
Sometimes
you
it's the
not,
middle
Susan?
one. Exactly, right? You're working full time, have my own entrepreneurial endeavors. And so I was working full time, and I was on a business trip and taking a break, and I was with one of my mentors, and it's day 87. So I haven't like even touched this proposal. And I was like, I'm crying. I was like, I'm just so behind. I don't know what to write about this book. And she's like, you fool, like you have expertise, like lean into your expertise. And I'm like, oh yeah, you're right, right? Because almost 10 years before, in 2015, I did my very first TEDx talk.
Mm,
And it's called Uncovered: Finding and Being Authentically Myself in the Workplace. And that talk was designed around the data that Deloitte University had just released about covering in the workplace, right?
okay.
And so what was fascinating about that data was they found at the time, so this is 2014 data, that 61% of people, regardless of any like demographic indicator, cover or hide a part of their identity in the workplace every day, right? And then of course, as you like cut into that, then for women it's more, for folks from marginalized groups it's more. And then you're like, okay, like then what does this mean for how people are performing in the workplace? How do I, as an employee, how do I, as a person in control of my career, ensure that I can show up and be fully who I am? Because the cost of that is that you're not optimizing for people's full potential.
Yeah, exactly.
So, right. So, serendipity, synchronicities. What ends up happening is I submit my book proposal to the first publisher. First publisher is like, we don't know if you have enough reach. And so for me, it could have been easy to, quit and be like, okay, well, but what I heard in that rejection was not that my book idea was wrong, right? Because I knew that I needed to talk about identity in work and identity and authentic leadership. You just weren't excited about me. And it just so happened, I have a girlfriend, Helene Knapp, who I will love forever. Our funny story is we met in a field in Israel herding sheep during a leadership program.
Wow.
So we get off the plane and we're herding sheep and goats. And that's been my sister since 2019. So we were
Aw.
just so happening the day I got the rejection, or it was like the door still open, but no, right? And so she just come out with a book on Post Hill, and she was like, forget them. I'm going to introduce you to my publisher, and you're going to get a book deal. And again, my brain, I'm like, is this how this works? And Debbie like reached out to me. I gave her the proposal. I gave the other publisher, and she was excited about me. It was verbal offer. And so then I was off to the races in writing the book. But again, with synchronicities, the data that had come out in 2014 came out again in 2024, Vicky.
Mm,
And so I'm like, oh, this is like perfect because I can bring this data back, talk about the workplace culture and experience, And would you believe that the data still showed in 2024 that 61% of people are going to the workplace every single day, hiding aspects of their identity? And what I loved about the data in this iteration is they did more cuts of it. And
Mm,
so, what also won't surprise you is that 67% of senior level executives are covering. And so, if we at the highest levels of leadership aren't showing up and aren't creating environments where, oh, yeah, by the way, companies that have authentic leaderships perform 147% better per share than their competitors, right? Like, I think sometimes people hear authentic leadership and think it's a feel good. There is data to support what a healthy culture means for impact and performance, right? And so, for me, this book is one, partially just a story I've carried, but has been this like constant message of we need to be thinking about the environments that we're creating for people. People at their best produce their best.
yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And eventually you do show up as who you are. So why not just show that in the beginning, right?
Exactly. And the thing that I want people to hear, right? Because I also feel like there are all kinds of conversations on the internet. I know you've heard them too, where people are like, don't come as your authentic self to work. I'm not talking about a superficial face of authentic leadership, right? As a human capital leader, I know for a fact we have policies and, culture in place to ensure that people, for the most part, have an equitable experience and a safe experience in the workplace. What I'm talking about is, can we lean into our discernment and our self trust and our self awareness and our risk taking to create environments that support people and being able to lead and be right? And so it's less about, for me, oh, Suzette can have, and Suzette and Vicky can wear pink. And so more about when they show up in their pink in the meeting, do we allow space for both of them to share their voices in the ways that are comfortable for them, but still contribute and be a productive part of this team?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And that just expands perspective for people, right? Like
Absolutely.
when you're showing up fully who you are, you get to bring your whole self in, but you're giving somebody a different way to look at something, right? Because we all,
Absolutely.
and like if you look at Edelman's trust barometer, like their 2026 survey, it talks about how we like 7 out of 10 people have an insular mindset, right?
Mhm.
Which means we're shutting down and we're not being open to other people's perspectives. That's a very dangerous place to go. Like we want to share and hear other people's, doesn't mean you have to agree, but being present and hearing it helps you expand your own thinking, right? Like, I never thought of it
Absolutely.
that way, or I didn't realize this person was experiencing this way. So I think there's
Absolutely.
a number of things that you're sharing that is so crucial for not just leaders, but companies in total.
Absolutely. And I want to believe, to your point, that healthy dissent probably breeds more innovation than anything else. If we can come together and have a healthy conversation where everybody may not agree, but it's going to drive us to a place of being and creating something different than we might have otherwise had, I'll
Yeah.
pick that every day over groupthink.
Likewise.
Good day.
I mean, I think what you just said, like you just hit the nail on the head, right? Like that's where the best innovation comes from. It's also the buy-in, right? When you have everybody, not everybody literally, but when you have people invested in the conversations, you do
Absolutely.
get the engagement, you get the buy-in because yeah, you may have thought something totally different, but then when I shared my idea or Suzette shared her idea, then you go, oh, okay, that rounds it out further. Maybe I wouldn't go about it the way Vicky would go about it, but there's essence of that are really important to the message or the project or whatever it is we're working on. And I think sometimes we lose sight of that.
Absolutely. And I'll be honest, I think some of that comes from what we see rewarded in the workplace. And if
Yes.
we constantly see specific behaviors or misbehaviors rewarded,
Yes.
and we are not honoring that there are other ways of communicating, there are other styles of leading, there are other ways of, a host of things, and on and on and on and on and on, people will pick up right? The behavior or the habit that they see rewarded, and for better or for worse, that I think hinders a culture because people are no longer focused on how do I help to create. It's more about how do I get credit for.
Yes, yes, Suzette, you're actually, yes, that's exactly right. That's exactly right.
Exactly.
And it's being aware of that, even when we go back to leadership, right? Like you might be an employee sitting in the room hearing this and see that somebody's not being acknowledged. Speak up. That's leadership. That's influence. That's calling it out in the room to say, wow, you know what Suzette just said there? That really resonated with me. Or maybe it didn't resonate with me, but I think we need to take a moment and just expand on that. And that in itself is leadership and expressing your voice of how or what you're interpreting.
Absolutely. And I think now, especially for the environment we're in, my ask of leaders, but my challenge to leaders is to ask themselves, right? And to challenge themselves to say, this is the culture I actually want to create, and then build the plan to actually do that. I think what we're also seeing right now is a lot of happenstance culture.
Yeah, it's true.
And as a lead, right? Like, and I think that you owe it to the success of your team. You owe it, right? Because again, at the end of the day, we're all going to work to produce, right? Like, if I say I'm going to XYZ company, it's because I believe in what it is that they believe in. Hopefully, it's aligned, but also, like, I want to have an income out. I want income, but I want to have an impact on their bottom line, right? And a part of that is in if I want a high performance culture, I need to have an incredible, great culture where my folks can bring to the table, like, actually, I don't agree in creating all kinds of space of that. But that culture only comes with intentionality. And it's how do leaders create the environment and the culture that actually sets their teams up for success. And it's not just you get the org health data and you address what's not working, right? Because then you take your eye off of what's working. It's like, do I have a 360 lens and plan for all of this?
Yeah. Love that. Love that. So true. And not easy to do, especially in the environment we have today, because things are moving
Yes.
so quickly, right? So, one
Right.
of the things that your book challenges is this idea that titles equal power, safety, or success. So, when did you actually start to realize this, that a title can disappear, but the purpose has to stay there?
It's funny because I think one of the biggest blessings, again, of my career when I entered is I've always had leadership access. But I will say the place where I realized the most that title did not negate your ability to influence or have an impact on leadership much higher above you was in tech, right? And so I like to say I was at Google during the classic Google era. We still had like Laszlo, you still had Sergey and Larry. And so you still have the very like young, teenage, vibrant Google. And what I experienced there was even when I was just a team lead, even if I was like a program manager, if my work was attached to an OKR, that a leader like Sundar was supposed to see, the expectation was that I was sitting in those conversations, giving insight and perspective on my work, right? And so, I think about when I was on the Google search team, I would be sitting in meetings with our SVPs, like the head of assistant and the head of this product and all these people giving a download because at the end of the day, I own that space and Ben had to take it to Sundar. And for me, it was like a clear, like, is your function and not your title
Mm,
that dictates the expectation.
right.
For sure, for me, was the clearest in tech, and it's continued to be that, right? So as I've continued to explore my opportunities, it's this role might have like a smaller title, but it is I get to have an entire impact on a global strategy, or I get to have an impact or drive change in this way. And to be honest, you're gonna be like, oh, Suzette, so like make that plain. I think some of my ability to separate title from role and work has come with like allowing myself to have discernment about why I'm choosing, right? And so it's when you as the because what I want to be clear is We as people are accountable for our experience. And so, even for as much as like opportunity comes for me, I still am responsible for discerning what the opportunity is, making sure that it's aligned to what I want, and then opting in or out. And so, for me, what became important is outside of the title, is it work that I want to do? Is it work that I see myself leading? Is it work that I think is impactful? And that mattered far more to me than any title.
Yeah, agreed on that. Big time. Is it connected to your purpose? Like, and so many people don't know what their purpose is, right? And
Right.
so I love how you articulated that. So thank you. And what else came to my mind when you were saying that is like, why, especially women, I don't hear this with men as much, but with
Mhm.
women, where often we will say, well, I don't have that title, so I can't lead. Right? And what you just said negates that, right? You don't have to have a title to lead. So, audience that's sitting here listening to this, like ask yourself, how many times have you had an opportunity to lead, but you've resisted or hesitated because you felt like you had to have a title to be able to share something or to influence something? And I don't know, Suzette, do you hear that yourself?
And there are the studies that, women will see a job description and be like, I don't have all of these skills and so I can't do it. And men will see the same job description and be like, I could do three of these things, so this is my next job, right? And I
So
think
true.
again, right? And I think again that's like something that we're taught. Right. And like, so these are like learned, picked up beliefs and behaviors that, again, I talk about mental health. We need to get into spaces of, whatever is going to help us strip away the trauma and the learning to get back to a place of seeing ourselves more clearly. But I also want to say what excites me about where we are at now in the generative AI conversation is that is no longer as important as skill.
Mhm.
And so for me, the reframe is it's not what the title is, it's does your skill set align to what this opportunity is? And will you have an impact, right? Like if you even look at, let's take for instance sales roles over the last like 3 years, you're not seeing chief revenue officer roles come online as much as you're seeing strategic partnership roles. And if you're not looking into the skill set of that, you might miss that you actually have it's the the costume change, it's the outfit change, the title has changed, but the remit and the responsibility hasn't. And so what my ask for people now is stop thinking about yourself in terms of a title and actually begin to build your understanding of your skill set, because especially in a world where AI now is the first line of review of resumes. It is the first line of entry point for getting things scheduled regarding interviews. AI is like taking over, generative AI has taken over the ways that we are getting exposure and access to new opportunities now, in a highly digital world. If you don't have the lens on your skill set and are still holding on to title, you've become your own barrier to entry.
Yeah.
And so it's how do you become a better steward of the narrative around your skill set, the value add, and your impact, and how do you bring that forth in conversations regardless of title?
Wow, love that. That's awesome. That's awesome. And so true. So, audience listening to this, hit rewind, go back and listen to that comment one more time. And I do want to touch on something though, because we talk a lot in a lot of the podcasts, we talk about the differences with men and women. And when you were talking about, like, I mean, it is fact, men will raise their hand if they have 40%, where women, you have to have 99%.
Mhm.
Instead of us looking at that and going, well, I begrudge men for having that kind of courage, what do we need to do to be able to do that? Why would we not put our hand up and say, first of all, yes, I have the capability, and if I don't have it with one specific area, or if I don't have it with half of that, I know how to build a team around me that has the skill set required to execute on whatever that might be. I'd love your thoughts on that.
I think honestly, Vicky, that comes from a place of we are taught that we must be perfect. And while people will say it, we're not often encouraged to go in with the learner mindset. So I can have all this impact from what I've done versus, you know what, this next great opportunity, I can do these 5 things, but I will grow as a leader if I learn the other parts of this, right? We're not taught that two things can be true at the same time in terms of going into a role. I can both be an excellent, talent acquisition leader that has years of experience finding talent, but I've never built a learning and development program. And now I'm going to go into this organization and do just that. You have to have all of the things because you need to be perfect in it. And I was like, the reality of that is there's no world in which anybody has 100%.
Exactly. Exactly. Well, and that's why I bring it up, Suzette, because I think that that's an area for women in particular. We have to embrace that we're perfectly imperfect. Brene Brown's book
Exactly.
is, I mean, that one's been around for years, but the messaging in that is so powerful because we're not perfect. And if you don't say yes to these opportunities, you do get passed over. So raise your hand. Don't even raise your hand. Just go for it, right?
Go
Put
for it.
yourself in the positions where you can actually step into more of what you do want.
Absolutely. And it's it's fascinating because I also say if we go back to some, because what I don't ever want to remove is organizations' accountability in creating inclusive environments that are supportive of their people. And I think depending on the corporate environment you've come up in, right? Like, so most recently tech, it's fail fast. And even for tech, I would say there needs to be a reframe on, like, this is a learner first space. So it's not that you're failing fast, you're taking on and learning new skill set. And I think if we change the framing of that, because who wants to fail? Right?
Nobody.
Like no, making hundreds of $1,000s a year being like, and I'm gonna fail, but I am gonna learn. And so it is, how do we give permission for a learner mindset, which then requires, right? And I think also if women felt more supported in taking bigger risks, right, there would be a reduction in risk aversion, right? Because what you do also see at the more senior levels in an organization in particular is there's not a ton of support around executive onboarding and support. And so you look at numbers and you do see women leaving new executive level roles faster, but some of that is organizations need to be providing better support for a learner space for people. Like, yes, I've been an executive at this level for years, but I still got to learn your culture, I got to learn your tools, I've got to learn your products. And so it's allowing space for learning.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with you. And it's thinking about the possibilities in that space. What can be created, right? Like I
Absolutely.
mean, if we look back through history, how many times somebody, is going to try to create the Thomas Edison, like to create the light bulb. He kept failing and failing, but look at all the things that he did create along the way. Like I think there were like 1,200 inventions. So if you
Absolutely.
can shift the mindset from, it's about the journey and what are you learning along the way. I think that's a
Absolutely.
powerful message. But I do want us to think about, like, we could redefine leadership for this next generation coming up of women. And we did that without titles. What would that look like?
Oh, this is a good one. All these questions have been incredible. I think that, and I said this a little bit before about Gen Z, but it is a regrounding in values
Mm,
and not feeling that we have to be anywhere in any situation in any organization because we have to, but because it's aligned to our values, our beliefs, our purpose, and it is supportive of who we're growing and becoming as leaders, right? I think leadership should not feel, especially for this next generation of folks, I don't think they will allow it to feel like something that's being done to them.
mhm.
It should feel very much like the incredible word you keep using, like a journey and like an evolution and like a development. And like even in my own circuitous journey, it should feel like you're continuing to gain and grow. And leadership shouldn't feel like a destination.
Love that. Love that. That's very powerful. So, where can people find you, Suzette?
So I am on every platform, I feel like. But my website, where folks can join my newsletter, they can get more resources for the book, so I have a companion workbook, learn more about my coaching, etc. Is www.suzette, S-U-E, because my mother thinks I'm extra special, E-T-T-E. So it's SUEZETTE.com. On LinkedIn, I'm at Suzette. On Instagram, I'm at Suzette. On TikTok, it's the only platform as an early adopter where I'm like, how does somebody get my name? But it's at Suzette Yasmin Robotham. But I'm a heavy user of social media. I love to stay in touch with my community and would love to stay connected with yours as well.
Oh, I'd love that. Awesome. Awesome. Well, I'm super grateful to have you here today. And, I think one of the things that I'd like to leave our audience with is to think about, if titles do disappear tomorrow, what do you or how do you want people to remember you for? And how can women in particular, how can we start building the legacy today?
I think you want people to be able to talk about you living a life that was full and reflects the very best of every single element and aspect of your life. You want people to say that she radiated joy.
Love that. So, yes, so our audience out there listening, like, think about that. What do you want that legacy to sound like, right? Is it, you're the president of X, or is it the impact that you've had? And so I think that is an important distinction when we start to think about, how do we want to be remembered versus the titles that we carry. Suzette, thank you so, so much for joining me today. This has been a great conversation, very lively. So I love that. Lots of energy.
Thank you for being a vessel and for just being incredibly and wonderfully you, and for creating this space for us. I appreciate you.
Thank you. Thank you. It's my pleasure. I am very proud that we have so many amazing guests that come on the show and share your wisdom, your experiences, your knowledge. I think that's how we actually start to change the world a little bit. So I'm grateful for that. So thank you.
Thank you.
Audience, thank you for being here. We're super grateful. Leave us a review, subscribe to the channel so you make sure you get all the latest and greatest podcasts that are coming in. We download every week. We have a new guest coming on. So make sure you're in the know of who's who and taking in all this amazing information that you're getting. And if you visit us at Women in Leadership Empowered, you can take our free leadership quiz. It'll give you insight as to how you present yourself to the world. So be sure to do that, gain some insight today. And we look forward to seeing you on the next Women in Leadership Talk podcast. Thanks, Suzette. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.
Thank you for joining us for Will Talk, sponsored by Women in Leadership Empowered. To learn more about our programs, please visit www.willempowered.com. We look forward to seeing you in our community.